So I just found this thing in a box, and I remember making it about 6 years ago. It did look better 6 years ago. Now it's kind of fallen apart and the electronics are all knackered. I had in mind when Speed Freaks came out that I would do all of the Speed Freak stuff, but I'd do it with muscle car model kits and trucks and stuff like that, just to make it a little bit more fun. Maybe fun is a little bit of a loaded word. But now that I've found it, I think I want to turn it into the diorama that I've had in my head for a few years, which is this. Going off a cliff, chased by a load of Atalan Jackals. Is it Atalan Jackals? The Gene Stealer cults, guys. Yes, let's go full Orky Mad Max. So after I pulled out the crew of this car in what looks like a viral, bot fly extraction video, there's 2 Orks and 2 Gretchen. The car is just missing some rear wheels and some broken off exhaust pipes, which is, at this point, it's probably just easier for me to make those from scratch rather than to try and find where they broke off in this basement. I'm going to fully disassemble this and get to work on restoring the original build that this was 6 years ago. When sticking parts back on, knowing that the underside of this car is going to be obscured by sand and dust, hopefully, and because it's built by Orks, I can get away with just heaping on some homemade sprue goo, which is going to set and it's going to go hard in about 24 hours and turn into concrete, basically. And thankfully I've still got the original plasticard tubes lying around from when I originally built this car. Which is, it's just going to be a case of taking a smaller tube and inserting it into a larger tube and gluing it in place. Which serves no real purpose other than to make it look a little bit busier and a little bit more like an exhaust pipe. As for the Atalan Jackals, they're one of the cooler Games Workshop kits to come out in recent memory, and by recent memory I do mean probably half a decade at this point. They feel suitably Fury Roadish and have a lot of movement and energy going on. Yeah, it's a fairly nuts and bolts Warhammer kit, there isn't much to say about it really, although it did give me a hankering for some Gene Stealer cults models. I do have a Tyrannid army that I use in one-page rules, and I do think it's super easy and simple to combine the army lists so that I can just inject a little bit of the Gene Stealer cults into my Tyrannid army, but yes, that's by the by. So I think I've got pretty much all the bits and bobs I need to make this thing in terms of models. The only thing that I'm going to add, I think, is a stop sign on the front of this with the rest of the wooden parts of it being splintered and split off at the sides. I think that might be just a final little cute touch to add something extra and add a bit more motion in there. I would just cut that out of plasticard and then paint the stop sign, but I am way too shaky for that kind of freehand at the minute. So I think I'm gonna duck into Blender real quick, just make the shape, put the lettering on. If I can get the supports to behave, I'll do a resin print. If not, I'll just do a plastic print and make do. But I think that's the next step, and then I have all of my non-crafty bit assets ready. So yes. And yeah, here's that skip foam that I mentioned in my last video. Skip foam making a comeback. Handy for stuff like this where I just need to hack out a rough shape without adding much weight or complexity to the build. It's not especially great for rock faces since it's quite crumbly and messy and chips easily, so it's got poor detail and it's not very hard wearing, but we can just throw it in the middle and get a core shape down in like 2 minutes. Thankfully, I found this plaster rock face that I made a couple of years ago for something. It's a failed cast. There's loads of air bubbles in it on the surface, but it's who cares? With the siding on, we can start to fill the big gaps and build up some of the landform shapes. I do like working with plaster. Maybe like is too strong a word. I rely on plaster because it's cheap, it mixes with water, has no real odor, and it sets in about 10 minutes so I can carry on working, and it has no shrinkage. I've got some small rock molds just ticking over in the background that I'm going to work in here and there to plug some of the gaps where I need a little bit more detail on the gap filler. Plaster's great and all, but like adding detail to it once it's dry is time consuming, and I do not especially care for my time to be consumed. I add paper pulp to the plaster and water mix to basically give it a bulking agent. Yeah, the chickpeas. The chickpeas of the miniature wargaming world. Now I've hopped back into Blender and bashed out our gimmick rigs to hold the car and hold the bikes in midair, suspended over the cliff edge. This was easy enough to just wiggle around some geometric shapes, then fire it over to the printer. The printer was set to like super draft mode, so it could just fire this out in like half an hour so that I can check the fit, make sure it's right. And I don't need it to look pretty because we're just going to cover it up anyway, in theory. Then we're just going to bust out the texture paint, some generic earth texture paint, and something called Shadow Earth, whatever the fuck Shadow Earth is meant to be. Just as a note, in case anyone tries this, the Martian Iron Earth Crackle paint was meant to crackle and look like dried earth, but because we're wet working on this project, it didn't actually crackle when it's set. So it only seems to work when there is zero moisture going on, which this thing is not zero moisture going on. In fact, it will probably still be drying for a few weeks after this video comes out. You might have noticed that I did make a little masking tape circle on there. This is going to be a nest or egg clutch thing for a cute little lizard who's going to be, oogling the action happening above her. I thought it would be nice to add a little comic element to the diorama. For the Atalan Jackals, I'm going to paint a few spots of colour on there, but mostly I'm just going to leave their armour and clothing white. I'll do a top wash over these guys with the enamel washes and then sponge it back later, and it's just going to save us time, and it is going to give us a good enough look. For our orcs, I'm going to try this recipe that I found online. I definitely didn't do a good job of it, but it is what it is. For anyone who wants to try it, it's like an orky desaturated green base coat, followed by a really desaturated green like Citadel Strachan green or Green Beret from Two Thin Coats, then a top highlight of Skeleton Legion, but any kind of pale sand colour will do the job. And then on the stretchy areas like elbows and around the mouth and the top of the head and stuff like that, we're going to spray a little bit Acadian flesh tone on there, or in this case, I think it's Dwarven Skin from Two Thin Coats. I then fill in some various details like boots and belt straps and absolutely anything else. Whatever, just any colours will do, I guess, because we are going to top wash this whole thing when it's done. We've selected our enamels from two companies who definitely need a PR consultant on standby, and because we're using Villainy ink, we can sit down with a coffee and do 8 hours of this. Back to the car as our focal point of the whole build. We're going to take a little bit more time over it, and we're going to distress it properly and almost treat it like a scale model. So first we build up some lighter coloured wear on the top and edges. This is to simulate like sun bleaching and physical wear and distress. As an orky vehicle, this thing is pretty much enduring a life of misery and stress. So we want to reflect that as we go. As always, we just do this with a sponge on the end of an electronic component grabber. As we go on, we can then take our sponge with some rhinox hide, and then we can just kind of carefully carve those raised areas, just carve into them to expose the rusted metal and dirt and mud underneath, whatever you want it to look like. Then we take a knackered brush and run some directional metallic lines along the top of the car. This just adds a little bit of perpetual forward motion, as Tony would say. It just adds a little bit of that to the mix and gives the car some directional weathering. And now everything has been enameled suitably. So after it's set, we load up our makeup brush with some white spirit and start to peel back the film of the wash. Lighter applications will come off quite quickly and leave a really nice colour tint underneath, while leaving the areas where the sponge can't quite reach with a buildup of crust and dirt. Some of the Villainy ink stuff can be pretty stubborn, so I get a Q-tip in there and start grinding away at it to reactivate the enamel with the white spirit and loosen it up. But you can see on the white armor of the bikes, this pops those light values and colors just right back to almost where they were before the wash went on, and does all of the contrast work for us. Good enough, at least. And I did in fact lose a shitload of footage here, but basically I primed the whole diorama in red and then used sand coloured rattle cans to highlight up, and now I'm doing some dry brushing to pick out certain areas. Absolutely didn't think about this too much, so I ended up just trying a load of different things like dry brushing, sponging, airbrushing, but all of that footage is lost, so who cares? But I did really want that Mars-Earth reddish tint to come through, so I started throwing around some Vallejo weathering powder. I like to sprinkle it on first, clean off the brush, and then start blending what's on there. Because once this stuff is on, it is a bit of a pig to get off, and it is difficult to backtrack. So I tend to go slow and steady and cautious and careful. Right, let's tackle that dust we want. Okay, so the illusion is gonna hide all of those armatures that are supporting the vehicles under clouds of dust kicked up by their motion. This is my second time using cotton wool. The first time we don't talk about that, and it's definitely not as reliable as teddy bear stuffing, which I've used in the past to great effect. But I wanted something that looked a little bit more cel-shaded, more animated and more cartoony. And I think if I'd spent like more than 90 minutes on it, I probably could have nailed it. Yeah, could have. But my camera gear was needed elsewhere, so I just basically had to throw it on with a shitty stick and hope for the best. Well, not the best. Passable. I had to hope for the passable. The main faff was just getting the physics right. The secondary faff was the colour not looking right. So I did what anyone does when there's a miniature painting frustration, and I throw a litre of contrast paint skeleton horde at the problem. Then I just threw some grit on and sealed it with some varnish, and I thought, you know what? Yep, that'll do. For some last touches, we threw on a slogan that Health and Safety Frog came up with, and gave our little lizard mum a few plants to hang out with. Yeah, she got a nice little house going on down there. Nice. Yeah, man, a mixed bag for sure. It's not how I envisaged this turning out exactly. I should probably have just gone for teddy bear fur stuffing for the dust clouds. I know how that works and I know how to control it better. But hey, if you don't try something new, you won't learn nothing new. And if you don't learn nothing new, then yeah, man. But it feels like a nice little end page for this model that I started and abandoned 6 years ago. And just realizing an idea and churning it and finishing it and being happy enough with it. That's most of what I really want out of this hobby, to be fair. Thank you for watching, and thank you to my wonderful Patreon community for their ongoing love and support. If you want to be part of the MS Paints Ewok Village, then check out the links at the end of the video or down below. For now, cheers. I'm out of here.